Today we have another titan in tech, Nandini Ramani. In 2017, Business Insider titled her as one of the world's most powerful female engineers. She's the former VP of engineering at Twitter, where she worked directly with Jack Dorsey. She then left for a health unicorn startup called Outcome Health, which was valued at $5.6 billion. She led the group as the COO and for a while as the interim CEO. Outcome Health is delivering educational content to the point of care, which means when you go to the doctor's office, you can read about health content on the tablet, TV, or phone. Let's go hang out with her. All right, thank you, Nandini, for joining us today. I think more than just the titles and valuations, what people really want to know is the journey that you've had. So along your long journey, what are points of adversity that you went through where your career could have gone any which way?
So in terms of, if you want tactical things about what are the hardships in a journey, it's not so much hardships, it's about your attitude on how you deal with it, right? Like for some of us, I'm a first generation immigrant to this country and left India and came almost halfway across the globe, started there, and then with my electrical degree, I was in hardware to start with. And when I was in the hardware group, two things happened. I was there for 8 years. It was a great time. The margins in hardware are great, and I learned a lot, but there are a lot fewer women in hardware, which I think is even true today. And I watched the market where creating hardware ASIC chipsets was becoming a commodity, more off the shelf. So two things I learned was to watch the market and not just be laser focused on what you're doing and be deep in it. So I would encourage everybody to also keep an eye on what are the trends in the industry. That's number one. The second is we had a bug in one of our chips which needed respin, and it was a collective effort of a lot of people, and I was relatively junior then, but I got pinned with the blame, so to speak. And something that's interesting that I've discovered is that happens a lot. People tend to do that when you're in big groups at work. And when that happened, I did get a terrible review, but I almost look at that failure. It was devastating for me. I was young. It was the first time in my career. But what that did was it made me switch from hardware to software, which was pivotal in many ways. Because one, I have a better understanding of, when somebody says full stack, I really understand all the way from silicon metal all the way to up stack now, and which I think is very valuable. And it's also made my career journey that much more interesting. So, when things happen, I would say failure is literally a stepping stone. I know it's very cliche to say that, but you have to kind of look for that nugget to persist and find the next thing for you to do. And then I switched from hardware to software. And then I was at Sun Microsystems, went to Oracle, both very enterprise-heavy companies. Then I went from B2B to a B2C company with Twitter, so more consumer-focused. And then if you talk about leaps of things that happen which are so different, my latest part of the journey with Outcome Health, where I relocated from San Francisco to New York, is another example of, things you don't anticipate, but then you adapt as life, gives you lemons, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool because you're the second ultra successful person that we've interviewed who had a really tough first job where they thought their career was essentially over, and they kind of respun it, repivoted, and had a really cool journey. So what were the thoughts that were going through your head when you, at Sun Microsystems, when the blame was kind of pinned on you and you had to kind of transition from hardware to software?
So I got put into one of the, what is called diagnostics team when that happened. I got moved. And it's so many emotions. The number one thing is like your grief is what hits you. Like you're thinking you're outraged and you don't think the responsibility is solely yours. And so I did feel some responsibility and accountability, but for it to be squarely bestowed upon me, I felt was completely inappropriate. So it was grief, it's shame, it's having everybody look at you like, you did something wrong. But one thing is you could fold and wilt away when that happens. The other option is to just double down and say, you know what? If I'm not that person, then who am I? And then go find that. But I will also tell you, I had a good support structure. I had mentors. I had a good friend of mine who left from hardware to software, and he was the one who actually encouraged me to join the software team. So you kind of have to rely on the people who continue to support you. Go to people for advice. There's no shame in that. No shame in saying, I don't know something and what do I do? So I don't know if that's concrete enough for you, but those were some of the emotions for me.
Yeah, so speaking of support structure, I think you say that it's important to have both sponsors and mentors. Can you tell us what the difference are between those two?
So I learned that actually it's not my own, it's from Carla Harris.
Okay.
She talks about sponsors, mentors, and advisors. Everybody talks about mentors. Sponsors are people who champion for you. So when you go to a sponsor, you tell them all your positive things you do really well, and tell them what you're interested in. So they become an advocate. So when opportunities open up, they think about you and say, hey, you should go attend this conference. Or they talk to somebody and say, if you're looking for someone with this skill set, I know just the person, or, things like that. An advisor is someone you go to with a pointed question. Like if I want to learn the difference between Go and Java or whatever, of course I could Google it and find out, but I could go to someone who's an expert in that and they're going to tell me, hey, there's no garbage collection in this and there is in Java, and, so on and so forth. A mentor is a combination of the two. Someone you can go to and tell them, hey, here are my strengths and here are a lot of my weaknesses. What do I do about it? And they're people who will stand by you and hold up a mirror and show you what you do well and show you what you don't do well, but won't be judging you. Yeah. So I think it's important to understand those nuances. Yeah. I'm not sure I put that as well as Carla does, but she's amazing. I would encourage your audience to go listen to some of her talks. Carla Harris, she's amazing.
I think you quote your grandmother as being the greatest mentor in your life. Can you tell us about that and what made her a great mentor?
One of the, qualities that I really value and have learned, I think that it's become part of my DNA, is grit. My grandmother had a lot of grit. Mm-hmm. She was, she didn't even go to school, never educated, but you would never know it from her. She was just amazing with life skills in general. She taught me a lot about how to dust things off, pick yourself up, and, keep on keeping on, so to speak. And when I look back at a lot of lessons I learned back probably when I was 5-6 years old, and they all came from her. She taught me how to stand tall, I guess, Yeah,
I think family definitely has the potential for being your strongest mentors because they know both your weaknesses and your strengths.
Yes, in fact, I would say she was my biggest mentor ever because she knew exactly what I was not good at, and she told me that. It's a very tough pill to swallow, but that's one of the things I would say to you is acknowledging things you do well, but also learning and acknowledging things you don't, which are opportunities, is crucial. Yeah. Because we're not all alike, and, so when I want to be like someone, it's not one person. I've had so many mentors. Mm-hmm. I can't be like any one of them, but I kind of pick up different facets from different people and find it useful to not always emulate necessarily, but amplify what your core is.
And I guess another person that you may have been involved with during your time at Twitter was Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
Who may have been some sort of mentor or sponsor. What was your interaction or relationship like with Jack Dorsey?
He's amazing. He's such a visionary. He's great. I still remember some of my one-on-ones. We'd walk from Twitter to Square because we're almost adjacent in market. I mean, he's running 2 companies. I don't even know what to say. He's just unbelievable. Yeah. And before that, I also worked for Dick Costello. He's also incredible. Right. So 2 different CEOs and both spectacular in their own ways.
And you've done so much. Had such a cool journey at Twitter, where you kind of oversaw an organization of 1,000 to 1,300 technical people. So were there certain projects that you were spearheading, or were you just doing anything and everything related to engineering?
Yeah, so I wasn't actually overseeing the 1,000 people. It was more like I was supporting all of engineering in terms of efficiency. I ran this team called Engineering Effectiveness, but I also did multiple different things at Twitter. it was more about how do you make engineers more productive? How do you take away, the pain points in their day-to-day software development lifecycle? And especially when companies grow very rapidly and you hire so many people, it's important to be able to onboard them easily and give them a place where it's easy for them to do their jobs. And that's what my team worked on. It was more like back-end platform engineering.
So Jeff Bezos has said that as senior management, which you were as a vice president, I think your main role is to make one or two really big decisions each day. Did you feel that encompassed your role, that you're making one or two big decisions?
All the time. Like we had a monorepo decision whether to go one, full monolithic repository or not. And so every day you make big decisions, some of them like that, which is a fork in the road that you have to choose. And I think the biggest quality for a leader is to get most of your decisions right, number one. And two, make a decision, because indecision and paralysis is the worst thing. So having the courage to make a decision and then adapt and refine as you go along. It's not just important at work. I think it's important every day in life.
And here's kind of a tough question about Twitter, which is, what do you think about the increased censorship societally? Because Twitter is supposed to be the ultimate transaction of ideas. So do you think it's like a net good or net neutral or net bad for society that there's increased censorship?
Well, let me unpack that question a little bit. I think Twitter is fantastic for society. I do believe that at my core. I love the platform, love the people who work there, just love everything about it. In terms of censorship, it's a tough one. I do believe in freedom of speech, and I do want, I agree with the notion that Twitter should reflect the reality of the planet we live in. However, when you talk about technology, there is some bias inherent in the platform itself, in the fact that, you tend to amplify what people read and it becomes an echo chamber, number one. Yeah. And censorship, I think there should be some. It's a private company ultimately. And, the terms of service are the terms of service, and it's fair for everyone to abide by that. So do I think it's a bad thing? I don't agree with that. And I do think governance needs to catch up with technology, and that's not just true for Twitter. It's true for everything. Self-driving cars are here. Like, there's so many things that are happening, and I do think policy and governance needs to keep up.
And in 2017, you made a really tough decision, which is you had a really comfortable and high prestige job at Twitter, and you decided to take the leap of faith into a position of uncertainty by joining a very high value but still a startup, which was Outcome Health. So what were the thoughts going through your head at that time?
So when I joined the company, I'd done a lot of research, and I looked at fintech, healthcare, lots of different verticals, and then ended up deciding to go into health tech. And at that time, Outcome Health was the unicorn. They'd just raised north of $400 million and from big VC firms. And so I joined the company for the mission. It's a combination of hardware, software. It had all the potential and promise. And I was excited, honestly, to be going to a startup. But 7 weeks into my role there, the Wall Street Journal article hit. And that was kind of, speaking of
adversity
and the ground shifting under you, that was one of those times in my life and my journey. And a lot of people left, and I was in utter disbelief 7 weeks into my job. Yeah. But when that sort of thing hits, it was for me a flight or fight moment. I had to decide if I wanted to stay or leave. And I stayed a lot for the people in the company. They were just so wonderful, and it wasn't their fault that this had happened. And that was one. And the second is all the research I'd done, all the reasons I joined the company were still valid. So many VCs didn't make a mistake. I mean, they made a mistake in potentially trusting or vetting what was laid out, but the premise of point of care was still valuable. And so I stayed. And now, not quite 2 years, shy of 2 years later, we have recapitalized the company now as of last week, and transforming it, and I'm excited to be part of that journey. And the hardest thing there was I had to relocate from San Francisco to New York, which was not initially part of the deal. But now actually I've learned to adapt, and I love New York despite the weather.
And can you tell us what Outcome Health does? But overall, that's really exciting to join something with a lot of funding and a lot of scalability, because you can completely push the world from the way it was in the past to the way it is in the present and future.
Outcome Health, basically, we deliver content to doctors' offices. And we do this by delivering hardware devices that are both in the waiting rooms and the exam rooms. And we also have some tablets in the infusion room for oncology patients. So we deliver informative content that's customized to the type of practice and specialty it is. So rheumatology, oncology, neurology, like we have curated content that's valuable to patients. And as you know, with the healthcare system being what it is, the wait times in these offices are, according to Nielsen, 35 plus minutes in the exam room and waiting room. So we actually give patients the opportunity to have information that's actually validated, verified, and, otherwise the web can be a scary place when you go look for things. And then we also work with pharmaceutical companies and agencies and deliver campaigns and sponsored content for drugs and medication that might be applicable to the patients.
Yeah, you wrote an article where you kind of explained the patient wait time, and it completely resonated with me, because those were the exact thoughts that were going through my head, which are, should I grab my cell phone from across the room, or should I just wait on top of the crinkly white paper, or do I start playing with the medical apparatus in the room? So I think that's definitely something, if it's resonating through my head and you outlined it perfectly, it must be resonating with the rest of the 300 million people there in the US. So how do you target people who are just using their cell phone specifically?
Yeah, so your content has to be more valuable than what's on your cell phone. So I'm not saying cell phones aren't a necessity, but here's what I'll tell you about point of care, right? It is the last mile. It's when you're sitting there, it's moments when it could be happiness. You're pregnant with your first child, you're going to deliver a baby, or you're waiting there to know whether, what are the test results? Does somebody have cancer? Like, these are life-changing moments, not just for yourself, but your entire family and friend circle. Like, it is such a big impact on everything around you. And I remember when I was in Vegas for CES, I was watching we were in a cigar bar or somewhere where people were they had these ads for drugs. Nobody's even watching it. Okay. And mortality is so far from your head at that point, clearly, right? But in the doctor's office, it's so top of mind for you. So you kind of absorb, and to your point, you're sitting on that paper. It's usually surgical, so it's very cold, and, those are the moments people want the comfort of knowing. So you have the ability to show them what are the treatment options, what are some of the things, lifestyle changes you should be doing. And that's what our content does for them. And I think, let me tell you, I suffer from allergies, and I go to the doctor, and I will tell you, I'm thirsting for any information I can get on how I can feel better. Yeah. And I'm more sensitive and aware of that when I'm in the doctor's office than at any other time. So I think there's huge value in that. And then we also do a lot of measurements to show that it really works. It does have better patient outcomes.
Got it. So you track what impact the information had that you delivered to the patient?
Yes, we work with third-party firms to do that.
So in an ideal world, if everything goes to plan, what impact can Outcome Health have on the world?
I look at Hep C, the numbers are declining. That's a good sign. I'm not saying it's only attributable to point of care, but it really works. If you can cure people, if you can have fewer life-threatening. Honestly, I would say, other than solving world hunger, I can't think of anything that's more important than healthcare.
Agreed.
So that's our goal. We want to be in all doctors' offices across the U.S. and the world, and deliver better quality of life for patients.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the top 15 causes of mortality in the world, 14 out of 15 are related to health, and the 15th is road accidents. So healthcare is, definitely the place you can have the most impact.
Most impact, absolutely. I mean, and people adhering to their medication, making good choices in terms of lifestyle, like meditate. We know this. It's not like you don't know it.
Yeah.
But when you're there in the last mile with the doctor, I think you're more likely to absorb it and stick to it.
So what is next for Outcome Health? Over the next 5 years, what are you hoping to achieve?
So today we're in the point of care, which is, as I said, a physical location where the patient and doctor interact. Now we're seeing trends in telemedicine and other ways of reaching patients. So we want to go from point of care to moment of care. So Outcome Health to go, if you will. So you can take it with you wherever you are as a means to connect with the doctors. So
following
information.
Following up on that, so telemedicine is a trend that we're going to see over the next X number of years. So how do you make that transition from physical point of care to something that would be a virtual point of care?
I am not sure it's necessarily a transition. I think they'll complement each other.
Okay.
Because a lot of things you could do it remotely with the doctor, the interaction, but there are many things you cannot. You do have to be there in person. So I think we'll always see both coexist. But our goal is to give patients, even when they're at home, continuity on what they should be doing in terms of, between doctor visits. What is it you should be doing with your health and wellness is what we envision as telemedicine and moment of care.
You were actually the interim CEO for a while.
Yeah.
Up until...
My new CEO started, yeah.
So how was that transition and how did that change your day-to-day schedule?
It is just super busy. What can I tell you? It's I've never done that before. Like I've never run HR and several other functions. So it was complex. It taught me a lot. And I've loved it. It's been great. But now we have our CEO. Not just our CEO. I also have an excellent management team to support the company. And so I feel like it's in good hands. And I could certainly use the help. It was tough because a lot of people just left or were asked to leave when the company went through all the excitement, so to speak, in 2017. And having all of it on your shoulders is relatively hard.
Yeah.
And but I've learned so much from it. I would not trade it for anything in the world.
So moving on to your personal life, what is one of your most important habits?
I think the biggest one I will say is I'm a work in progress. Okay. I feel like I'm imperfect and a work in progress. That's not a habit necessarily, but that makes me a learner. It's a mindset. Okay. The other one is having grit and persistence. I think is very important. Never giving up. So my journey, it's taken me almost 2 years to get here with the recap and everything at Outcome is an example of that. It's a marathon. Most of these things are a marathon. Yes, you do them in sprints, but ultimately you have to think about the long run and not the immediate outcome, so to speak. I don't want to give you cliche things like hard work and things, but I do believe in like being mission oriented, being a work in progress. I don't know if you've seen my other talks where I had a professor tell me, learn one new thing a day. And as a student, that's very easy to do. You're learning so many new things. But I think as an adult, we tend to repeatedly do the same thing over and over again. So I try, to learn something new every day.
So number one habit is growth mindset. And number two is grit and persistence.
Yep.
Cool. What did you learn today?
What did I learn today? Good question.
No, I'm putting you on the spot. But
it's great. It's a good question. I do have to think about it. And if I haven't, I should.
Well, there's still time left in the day.
That's fair. Good point.
So what are your top 3 nonfiction books? And this is for people who are might be watching or listening who are interested in tech and creation, things to help them improve or...
Actually, I do have my answer. The example I gave you about Go versus Java, I learned a lot about Go today.
Okay,
I just thought about it during our brunch. That's the conversation we had.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead with your question on the books.
So books, what are your top 3 nonfiction books for helping someone create?
My go-to is Twitter. I would honestly say get on Twitter and follow, depending on what your interests are.
Yep.
I find that super valuable. I learn a bazillion new things a day on Twitter. Yep. But in terms of books, Outliers is a great book. The other one I really like, I'm not sure it's necessarily relevant to your entrepreneurial mindset, but Guns, Germs, and Steel, Jared Diamond. It's just an awesome book about human beings and how we're just amazing when you think about it, and how we got here from being hunters-gatherers to sending Teslas to space. Yeah. That distance is remarkable, and it is a growth mindset as well.
That's a very relevant book. It's the history of humankind.
Yeah, and I think it gives you faith in, no matter how you're feeling, the fact that human beings can do these amazing, remarkable things. The other ones that I really like, which are not, it's still fiction, but is P.G. Wodehouse. I really love the books that he writes.
What is that about? I haven't heard.
It's just, humor.
Okay.
British humor, but I love reading those just when I want to take a break. I love reading those.
And one of the last questions is, what is your daily schedule?
So when I wake up, I usually just wake up to Twitter. It's a bad habit or a good habit, depending on how you look at it. So I scroll and I follow a lot of pharma and different types of things to look at trends and who's acquiring whom and how many IPOs are going which way, etc. Just like look at the market. And then, I get to work, and my first focus at work is, of course, revenue, yeah. Like try to understand where we are in terms of our growth. And then customers, a heavy customer focus on, do we have complaints? Are we seeing anything positive? Should I be meeting with people, etc.? And then I get into my normal schedule of one-on-ones, team meetings, peer. What I have switched, I always do my workout at the end of the day, which many times, of course, I run out of steam. So I'm trying to flip that around and try to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning to go do my workout. So let's see how far. This year it's been reasonable so far. We'll see how long I continue that. Steve Jobs says, stay hungry, stay foolish.